I started doing commentary in WCW, and I was the luckiest kid you can imagine because I learned under Jim Ross. And that, you can give him a hand, he deserves it. And it's funny because I did an interview a couple weeks ago with somebody about something, and it wasn't about UFC 200. It was some WWE related interview, and they asked me who I thought was the greatest talker of all time, and my answer was Jim Ross, because if you look, and he said, well, that's funny, I thought you'd say Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock certainly go down as top 5 greatest talkers of all time, but I think the greatest talker of all time was Jim Ross, because when I talk for Brock Lesnar, I have to get Brock Lesnar over, I have to get his opponent over, I have to sell you on the event, the network, the live event, the concept that we're pushing on television, whether it's WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, just a network special, whatever that may be. Jim Ross had to get the entire show over. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours for WrestleMania. Jim Ross had to sell you on the event, on the participants, on the referees, that the referees had credibility. Every single solitary thing that you saw on your television, Jim Ross had to sell to you, because if he didn't, at some point, which happens now more often than it used to, you sit there and go, look, that's and Jim Ross was responsible for you never to say, that's and I got to learn underneath Jim Ross. So I learned timing, I learned psychology, I learned pacing, I learned speaking in sound bites, all from Jim Ross. So in terms of being a commentator, I was the luckiest commentator ever, because my initial training was with the best talker ever. In terms of what I would do in terms of being a commentator now, I'd last about one night, because I wouldn't fit in with the current commentary style, because I don't agree with it, simply because I think it has lost focus on what the job is. And the job to me has always been to sell the 3 most important concepts, whether it's WWE or any form of pro wrestling or sports entertainment, or UFC, or you call it football here in America, we call it soccer, basketball, hockey, it doesn't matter, tennis. I'm a big Novak, anybody here follow tennis? I'm a big Djokovic fan, and love his matches with Roger Federer. And what a rivalry that is. And anytime those two get into the semifinals or the finals together, I'm glued to the television set. Why? Because I know 3 things. I know who they are, I know why they're competing against each other, and I know why I would sit there and watch it or pay to see it. You want to sell a wrestling ticket? You want to sell a subscription to a network? You want to sell a pay-per-view? Who are these 2 guys? Why are they fighting? Why should I give it? And if you answer those 3 questions, you have a sale. And the commentary of today has lost sight of that concept, which means I just would not fit in.
Just kind of going off that question, you mentioned Jim Ross, and Jim Ross said in one of the WWE DVDs at one point, he said that when you were in charge of Smackdown, Michael Cole and Taz would hate you because you would make them stay late and re-record and do all that sort of stuff. Talk a little bit about how important that was for you for the commentary of that show to reflect what you were trying to do.
When I became the lead writer of Smackdown, we were on the infamous corporate jet. And a very powerful producer in WWE was flying on the jet, and I said to Vince that, McMahon, by the way, and big barrel-chested Irishman, chairman of the board, billionaire, and I said to Vince that I really wanted his notes for Brock Lesnar versus The Rock at SummerSlam, this is 2002, because I want to prep Michael Cole and Taz for calling the match, since it's the main event of SummerSlam. And the producer leaned in and said, who said they're calling that match? And we had done the brand split, and now we were competing with Raw. And my answer was, well, they are the SmackDown team. It's a SmackDown match, and both Brock and Rock are on SmackDown. Therefore, the SmackDown team calls it. And with both Taz and Michael Cole sitting on the plane, the producer says, they're the B team. And at that moment, I just looked at the producer and at Vince and at JR, and I said, not from this moment on, they're not. And I turned to Michael Cole and I said, I'll see you in the studio tomorrow. We're going to revoice the whole show. And by the time that I'm done with you and Taz, you're going to hate my guts, but you will call the main event of SummerSlam. It will be yours because JR and Jerry Lawler will not be able to hang with you. So I went into the studio to revoice the SmackDown shows every single week, starting Wednesdays at 6 p.m. until about 4 a.m., because I just obsessed over every single match, because every chance we had to brand Taz and Michael Cole, or Michael Cole and Taz, depending on which one of them you ask is the lead of the team, I exploited that opportunity to brand SmackDown as the brand and Raw as our bitch, and JR and Jerry Lawler as the B team, which is where that term came from, because starting that week on television, I had Michael Cole and Taz call JR and Jerry Lawler the B team announcers, because that's how we viewed them, because we were the superior brand. And if you take a look at the numbers that we were drawing on television and in the live gates and in merchandise and on pay-per-view, we were whipping Raw's ass, and we were going to get the credit for it at least as long as I was going to be the lead writer and therefore in some aspect the producer of the announce team, up until the point that we pissed off the corporate structure so much by beating Raw that they removed me as the lead writer of SmackDown, because they couldn't stand how bad we were whipping Raw's ass. The role of the general manager is played out. I don't want to do it because it's been going on for 20 years, and whether you're the hero general manager or the villain general manager, it's enough. I don't know how many people really turn on WWE or any form of sports entertainment to see how a match is made. The show has become too much of, here's the story behind the show that you're watching. And I think sometimes people just want to see the show. I think people just want to understand who the characters are and see the characters pitted against each other in compelling situations or riveting storylines that have nothing to do with the corporate structure that orders the match because the general manager needs to sign the contract. It's too much. Again, it's going back to, with all due respect to the gentleman that I tore his ass out earlier, it goes back to that. It goes back to simplicity. It goes back to, well, we've never seen Brock Lesnar lose to one move. Wow, so wouldn't it be shocking if you did? And it goes back to that. Why do I have to know why Kevin Owens is going to get signed for a match against Sami Zayn? Why can't I just be told it's Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, and I sit there and go, wow, that ought to be a really good match, and I am intrigued enough to see it. So the role of a general manager, to me, played out. The question was also about being a writer. Yeah, I don't want to be on the writing staff. There are way too many writers. It's your concepts become distorted by too many other people who then have input into your original concept. And the way that I like to write things is very long term. I want to know where I'm going. I've never written the first page of a story and then figured it out along the way. I always write the end first. It's just my training. And it's just the way that I see things. Here's the finish. Here's what we're going to do next year at WrestleMania. Here's how we close WrestleMania. Now here's how we get there. And what will happen is I'll lay out 40 weeks or however many weeks it is until WrestleMania. Okay, let's pretend it's 40 just for the argument here. So please don't go on Twitter or Facebook and go, he said it's 40 weeks and it's really only 29. Not that that's my British accent, by the way. It's just my stupid accent for people who are stupid, of which I don't accuse any of you of being. Except, no, I'm kidding. It's a joke. It's too easy. It's simplicity. So, I'll sit there and lay out a 40-week storyline that every single week builds upon, and then in week 26 there'll be some jack off in that room that goes, "Hey, you know what we ought to do? We ought to put Jack Swagger into there and put him in the mix just for a little bit of a while." And you sit there and go, no, nothing against Jack Swagger or Alberto Del Rio or Michael Cole or Mike Chioda, the referee. Leave them out of this. This is 40 weeks I just wrote out. Leave it alone. We're doing great. And they put these people in, and your whole vision goes this way. And I just want to run my freaking head against the wall. And so, the job of the writer today is to be single and young and willing to compete for the number of hours that he's willing to work in a week. That gig ain't for me anymore. It's just not. But advocating for Brock Lesnar, that's an easy gig for me, because I can talk about Brock all day long, and he, more than any other being on the face of this planet, can back it up. See, that's the funny thing about this industry. Again, and again, I'm not picking on you. But this is my mentality. Seriously, once you lose the simplicity of it all, you get so marred and mired and bogged down with the BS that you lose the perspective. I first met Steve Austin in 1991. When he was sitting on a crate at center stage, and I was doing commentary with Jim Ross. And Steve had just been hired away from world class, and he had this huge knee brace. He already had knee problems, even back then. He had this huge knee brace on. And I had seen his work in Texas as part of a tag team with a gentleman called Rod Price, and his feud with Chris Adams over Chris Adams' ex-wife, Jeannie Clark. And Steve was sitting with Jeannie. Now, anybody who has ever seen Jeannie before was this breathtaking, busty blonde woman who just almost anybody could walk in a room with Jeannie and no one would notice you, because this was this beautiful, blonde, buxom Brit superstar walking in a room. But she sat next to Steve Austin. And all I could notice was this stud of an athlete with these piercing eyes just sitting there on that crate. And I said to Jim Ross, I said, "Is that Steve Austin?" He goes, "Yeah, we just hired him. We just hired this kid, Steve. He's going to be somebody one day." And I couldn't, it's one of those people that he walks in the room, and I could be talking on this microphone right now, and you don't have to look to the back. Steve Austin's not walking in the room right now. But if Steve Austin were to walk in the room right now, very quietly, with his head down, just to watch the show, something about that charisma, that intangible it factor that he owns, would cause every single one of you to just turn around. You'd feel his presence. And I wrote about that when I was in WCW, that this guy's gonna dominate the industry in that decade. Here's the problem. Everybody convolutes it so much that nobody saw it. And it's not that I'm so freaking smart to see it, is that I don't understand how anybody didn't see it. How do you not see this guy coming? It would be the same as saying Dwayne Johnson walked in a room and nobody noticed. Bullshit. When that man walked in the room, everybody notices. Why? Because he's The Rock. When Brock Lesnar walks in a room, trust me, everybody notices. He doesn't have to go, "Hey, I'm Brock Lesnar, I'm here." He walks in, you go, "Oh my God, look at that. Oh man, that's Brock Lesnar." Same thing as Steve Austin. And the fact that nobody could see it back then is one of the reasons why in that part of history, WCW was failing so miserably, because they just couldn't see it and it was right in front of them.